Welcome day-to-day attendees. My name is Owen Boberg. I'm a data scientist with the Indiana Management Performance Hub. Today I'm going to be talking to you about our enhanced research environment, or the ERE as we like to call it. This has been a tool that we've been using for the last year for a number of different projects, including the COVID response team and supporting external researchers who are doing great things with state data. So to kick off our discussion about the ERE, we'll talk about the benefit for researchers. And it's kind of really spelled out right here for us. And the benefit for research is that it enables the research to interact with sensitive data in a secure environment with pre-built computing tools needed to carry out their analysis. And what I hope to show with this presentation is kind of how we make that possible, how we get the quickest uptime to getting things done while still protecting the important and sensitive data that comes from the state. And before we start kind of going into the details of how all this works, I'd like to give a brief overview of the ERE by the numbers, as I like to call it, and that's kind of a current snapshot of everything we've got going on in there. As of today, I did a quick check, and we've got over 100 users. We have 20 separate agencies and universities represented in this user group, and there's a total of about 16 different projects where we have all these different users distributed and their various data sets. And in particular, I'd like to highlight the COVID-19 response team, which has approximately 68 users collaborating daily to get work done to help the state in the COVID-19 response efforts. Something I like to think about with the ERE is this kind of idea of reduce, reuse, and recycle. And I'm going to kind of spell these out here. So a big part of this, right, of what benefit of the ERE is this: reduce the security risk, startup costs, and technical debt. And this is just something that we need to get over to get projects done. We can reuse pre-built data sets and computing environments for multiple users and projects. And I'll kind of highlight that with some graphics and simplified versions of how this is all set up. And then what this does let us do, and the end users actually, is kind of recycle locally managed tech that they would have had to build just for one use case, right? Let's say you wanted to do data analysis with very sensitive data. You'd have to stand up a server that would just have that protected data. And this allows us to kind of all do away with that and just use one environment to kind of handle all these things together. So why we need the ERE, and this is kind of stemmed from this, what I call the traditional research cycle. This is something that I was in for a long time myself, actually. And so this usually starts with a researcher defining a data set and then going out and collecting a sample, or reaching out to someone like the Management Performance Hub and saying, hey, I'd like to do some research with this data. Then what would happen next is they would download the data locally to their personal computer. Then from that, right, they would take that data, they would analyze it with their local tools and code. They would come up with a result, publish it, define new questions, and then kind of start the cycle again. This is kind of the scientific method, how it goes on and on as we kind of do interesting research. Where this becomes a problem and this kind of typical cycle, so researchers will still come to us, they'll have a defined data set or sample that they'd like to study, and then we first run into a problem is this downloading local data to data locally to your computer, right? Sensitive data are something that we have to deal with every day, and we have to be good stewards of that data. And then we get in this next piece of analyzing data with local tools and code, and that can be a little bit overcome with some expertise, but with the ERE, we can actually kind of help streamline that as well. So I'm going to kind of go into each one of these issues in the red box and dive into them a little bit more. So downloading data locally to a personal computer. First thing, right, we all have this notion of state data. It does contain highly sensitive information, and that isn't something that we can just release out to researchers easily without a lot of very careful checks and balances. And then another part of this is that data sets are just becoming too large, right? We hear about big data all the time, and it's just going to get larger and larger as we're collecting more and more of it. So it might be the fact that you've gotten cleared to download this data, but you don't have the resources or the memory to actually do it. The next piece is, let's say you got past that first blocker. Then let's say you want to use some really cool new machine learning algorithm or some cool computing technique, but you aren't able to install the software because it doesn't work on your operating system, or it takes a lot of kind of computer expertise to get it working. And this kind of just slows down your research. So like I said, even if you could solve for both of these things, it was likely a single-use solution, and it was probably expensive for you. So this is kind of where the ERE comes into this, and I'm representing the ERE here by this yellow box, because someone will still come to us, they'll define a data set, they'll collect a sample, but instead of downloading the data, they're going to access the data through the ERE, and then instead of having to build their own tools and figure out their own software, they're going to use the pre-built computing environments and open source tools and proprietary software in the ERE itself. So we're bringing the data and the tools into a very secure location where someone can just log in and start doing research right away without having to do all that extra startup at the beginning. And then after that, it can come back to us and we can review anything that might need to get published, get it to them, and they can continue on this process. So it really does streamline everything for everyone, and it does it in a safe fashion. So written out a little bit more, right? Researcher, they'll request the data. They still go through the regular vetting to make sure that they're allowed to see the data that they're requesting. And then the data get added to the enhanced research environment. It's never going to leave. It's always within state control, which is another great thing. And then what we would do is we would create a specific project for that user and their collaborators in the enhanced research environment. And then we're able to assign them to that project or multiple projects, and I'll highlight that a bit as well. And so that's how we're able to control a user's access to data at the project level. And we can also assign multiple people to multiple projects so they can work with collaborators across a number of different things. So graphically, kind of what does that look like? We'll take a custom-built or predefined data set that's requested by the user. And what we're going to do, and I kind of have this modular out in boxes, is that we're going to attach it to an ERE project. And along with that ERE project, it'll have a shared folder where they can do collaborative work, save their output, and really not kind of even know that they're not working on their local computer. So once we've got the data set attached to the project into this shared space, then we have to add users to it. So let's say we have these user IDs, and I'm calling UID here 1, 2, and 3. These are collaborators from some institution, some university or something. They'd like to do some project. What we do is we can take their data, and they're all assigned to the same project. They all get the same folder, and then they form, this one unit within the ERE. And what I kind of highlight across here, if we see there's data set 1 on the far left, and it's also on the far right, but we see that they have different users, right? So this is where we can actually, as an agency, really streamline what we're providing to users, right? Because we don't have to recreate this data set and send it to 2 different locations. We can just attach it to 2 different projects. And these users 1, 2, and 3 might be working on a different problem than user 6, and they don't actually have to work together, but they can work from the same data. And then another thing that's very useful, right? You can see user ID 1 here lives in 2 different projects. So as we have, and this is actually an actual use case that we see frequently in the ERE, we can have multiple principal investigators that are working on multiple different data sets with multiple different collaborators, and it gives them a seamless way to just get in there and continue to work.